All right, so we're diving into color sampling technicians today.
Okay, sounds good.
And when you first hear it, it doesn't sound maybe super exciting, but it's actually a really intricate role. We're talking about the folks who make sure that, like, the color of the t-shirt that you love is that exact same shade of blue, whether you buy it online or you buy it in a store 1,000 miles away.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's about that consistency, isn't it? And it really is a fascinating blend of like scientific precision and a bit of an artist's eye as well, to get those colors just right. These technicians, they're kind of like modern day alchemists in a way.
I like that.
Yeah, they're combining these dyes and pigments. And just a quick reminder for listeners, dyes and pigments are those color substances that give everything from fabrics to paints their hues, They're the things that make color happen, and they have to combine these things, these dyes and pigments, to create those perfect recipes for every single color you can imagine.
So it's like they're deciphering the secret language of color.
It-
But it's not just like mixing pretty shades, right? I mean, I'm curious about like the day-to-day of a color sampling technician. What is it actually like to work in that kind of role?
Well, I think a lot of people might be surprised to hear that while there is definitely an element of creativity involved, a really significant chunk of a technician's job involves something called operations monitoring. So we're talking about really meticulously observing and controlling the dyeing process itself. And they often use some pretty specialized tools and technology to do that.
Okay, so that's interesting. Give me a for instance, like what are they actually monitoring and what kind of tools are we talking about?
Okay, so picture this. A technician carefully measures out these precise amounts of dyes and pigments, right? And they're using these formulas that, honestly, some of them are like top secret recipes, guarded by the companies.
Their special sauce.
Exactly. But even once you've got the formula down, that's only the beginning.
Right.
They need to make sure that the actual dyeing process, which, by the way, this often involves chemical reactions and super precise temperatures, all of that has to be executed flawlessly.
So it's not just mixing the colors, it's about controlling this whole intricate process to get that perfect, consistent shade every time.
Absolutely. And one of the really essential tools they use is something called a spectrophotometer.
Say that again?
A spectrophotometer. It's kind of like, think of it like a super-powered color scanner.
Okay.
It measures the way that light interacts with a dyed sample. And what that does is it allows those technicians to actually analyze and quantify that color with insane accuracy.
Wow.
They're looking at things like hue and saturation, lightness, and making sure that every single batch matches the standard perfectly.
It's like a fingerprint for color.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But I have to say, all that monitoring and checking and analyzing sounds like it could get a little repetitive. No.
Yeah.
How do color sampling technicians kind of stay engaged and find that fulfillment in that kind of work?
That's a great question. And it's true, there's a certain level of repetition in any sort of technical field like this, right? But I think for many technicians, the challenge and ultimately the reward comes from achieving that perfect color match again and again. It's about constantly trying to refine those skills, experimenting with new dye combinations, troubleshooting any inconsistencies that might pop up. It's really about problem solving with color.
It's like they're solving this colorful puzzle every day, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of challenges, I bet staying on top of like all the trends, right? In fashion design, that's got to be a big one, like constantly new fabrics, new colors coming out. How do they stay ahead of that curve?
Oh, you're absolutely right. The world of color never stands still. So these color sampling technicians, they have to be like lifelong learners, always researching, going to conferences, experimenting with new dyes and pigments. And, increasingly these days, they're even working with these cutting edge sustainable materials, which I'm sure we'll get into. But those come with a whole other set of properties and challenges.
Yeah, sustainable materials is something I definitely wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
Because it feels like there's this big push towards being eco-friendly in pretty much every industry these days. And color dyeing, I mean, it's historically been, kind of a culprit when it comes to environmental impact.
Absolutely. And it's actually a really fascinating area of innovation right now for color sampling technicians because they're having to figure out how do we achieve those same vibrant, long-lasting colors, but using things like natural dyes from plants and minerals, or even exploring new technologies like low-impact synthetic dyes.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about knowing the ins and outs of the traditional dyes anymore. It's like you got to understand how to pull color from like nature. which I'm assuming comes with its own set of quirks.
Totally. It's like they're bridging like this ancient knowledge of natural dyeing with these modern scientific methods. So, for example, they might have to experiment with different mordants. Those are substances that help fix the dyes to the fabric, especially when they're using these natural dyes, to make sure the color really lasts.
So they're not only making sure that the color looks amazing, but that it's going to stay that way and that it's not, harming the planet in the process.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Okay, so let's say someone's listening to this and they're thinking, this sounds like my dream job.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? How do they even begin to climb that colorful career ladder?
Well, a great starting point is to look for those entry-level positions, things like a trainee or a lab assistant. Those roles give you that awesome opportunity to really get your hands dirty, so to speak, learn those different dyeing techniques, and just kind of be in the trenches with those more experienced technicians.
Literally get your hands colorful.
Exactly.
But beyond the actual hands-on experience,
Right.
what are some of the skills and qualities that you think are really important for aspiring color sampling technicians to focus on?
Well, obviously, having a good eye for color and paying attention to detail is huge, but just as important is having strong problem-solving skills. Remember, these technicians, they're constantly troubleshooting, experimenting, getting creative to solve all these color matching challenges.
Because they like a good puzzle.
Right.
What about the actual interview process?
Yeah.
Are there any tips from RoleCatcher's guide, especially when it comes to like those tough interview questions, anything that really stood out to you?
Yeah, it's like you got to have all the answers to the color trivia night, ready to go. Right, exactly.
But then beyond just, that expertise, what about those soft skills we always hear about? How important are those?
Oh, they're so important. Employers are really looking for people who are great communicators, who work well on a team, and most importantly, who are adaptable. Color trends change so fast and new technologies pop up all the time, so being able to learn and adapt is key.
It really does sound like a career that has it all, that creativity, the technical side, and just constantly learning. So before we wrap up our deep dive here, I'm curious from your perspective, what would you say is the most rewarding part of working as a color sampling technician?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's knowing the impact their work has on our lives every single day. I mean, think about it. They're the ones who help bring to life those eye-catching ads we see, those outfits that just, make us do a double take, even just those calming paint colors in our homes. They're kind of like the unsung heroes of the visual world.
Totally. We take color for granted, but there's so much thought and work that goes into making sure that sweater is the perfect shade of green or whatever it is.
Exactly. And, as people become more aware of sustainability, I think the role of the color sampling technician becomes even more important. They're on the cutting edge of figuring out those eco-friendly dyeing processes so that the things we buy, aren't harming the planet.
So true. Well, next time I'm admiring a beautifully dyed shirt or a perfectly painted wall, even just like a piece of art, I'm going to think about all the work that went into making those colors really pop.
Me too. They've really blended science and art to create a pretty visually stunning world.
I love that. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this colorful exploration of the color sampling technician. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive and learned something new about the fascinating world of color. Until next time, keep those color wheels turning.